Erev Tov lekulam. Good evening. Hello to everybody, and welcome to the 6th Israeli Atlas Awards, an opportunity to recognise and really celebrate Israel's most innovative startups. And there are so many of them, I have to say. The awards are held by the Ayn Rand Centre in cooperation with the Marker and other partners such as the Prometheus Foundation, Dow Group, and Dr. Michael Kaufman, who we just heard from, Dr. Sharon Shacham, Mr. John Allison, Mrs. Iris Ginsberg, and our sponsors, E44 Ventures, Startup Nation Central, SmartUp, Amazon Web Service, Israel Aerospace Industries, and Champel Capital. These awards seek to raise public awareness of productivity, pioneering, and prosperity. The prize will go to the Israeli startup company which has created a new technology, idea, or product of exceptional value here in Israel and indeed around the world. Well, before we get to the ceremonial part of the evening, it gives me great pleasure to introduce tonight's keynote speaker and distinguished guest. At a time when much of the internet has become a dark place that feeds political division, misinformation, and social anxiety, Wikipedia stands out as a source of light and truth. To quote Jimmy Wales himself, it's a place that educates rather than destroys your brain. Jimmy Wales stands apart from the other internet pioneers too, the founders of Amazon, Google, and Facebook, because his contribution hasn't made him a gazillionaire. He was once asked how this squared with his affiliation with Ayn Rand's ideas. Jimmy Wales replied with a reference to Howard Rourke, the hero, I'm sure you all know, of Ayn Rand's novel The Fountainhead. And Wales reminded us of how Rourke chose to work in a quarry rather than compromise his artistic and creative principles. Objectivism is not, he said, about making piles of money. It's about achieving your vision. He did add, though, that there's also nothing wrong with making piles of money, so don't worry. Well, I'm sure we would all love to hear more about his vision, so please do welcome to the stage internet entrepreneur and, of course, the Wikipedia co-founder, Mr. Jimmy Wales. Welcome.
Okay, very good, thank you. I think, like some of the other speakers, I should say, Ani mevin kutsat ivrit, but those are the only 4 words I know, so I'll do this in English. So, to go back to the original vision for Wikipedia, the vision is to imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. That's what we're doing at Wikipedia, and every element of this vision statement is important to us. So every single person on the planet means we're inherently global, we're in many, many, many languages around the world. Free access, incredibly important to us. We want knowledge to be accessible to everyone. And the sum of all human knowledge, meaning that Wikipedia is a summary, it's an encyclopedia. It isn't, there's a lot of things that Wikipedia isn't. It isn't a wide open free speech forum. It isn't YouTube, so we don't really have funny cat videos. But it's a shame. There is humor in Wikipedia, actually. There's a great account on Instagram called Depths of Wikipedia that you should all follow. It's quite amusing. So, where are we today with this dream? So every month, Wikipedia is seen by over 1.5 billion devices around the world. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean 1.5 billion people. I would say probably most people in this room would see Wikipedia over the course of a month on your phone and probably your desktop computer and so forth. But still, it's a huge proportion of the internet. We have over 50 million articles across 288 languages. Now, many of these languages are quite small, and they are the up-and-coming languages. So many languages in sub-Saharan Africa, many languages in India are experiencing good growth. But of course, that growth is hampered by all of the usual factors, access to broadband internet, access to computers, literacy rates, and so on. But still, we're by far the most linguistically diverse website, and it's this huge global community that's working in Wikipedia. And where we started, I just think it's sort of fun. I recently did a sort of an art project last year, and I went back and recreated the first day of Wikipedia. And this is what it looked like. This was, I installed this open source software, UseModWiki. This is quite famous that people say, oh, the original logo was a flag. Well, that was only for like a day because I happened to have a flag, a US flag on my computer, and I needed to, in the installation, I need to add something. There was no real meaning to that. I typed "Hello World," which is, it's what programmers do when you learn a new programming language. It's quite traditional. The first thing you do is, just to show that you know how to print something out and you can get some output from the program, you just make a program that prints "Hello World" somehow. I typed "Hello World," but of course now that seems quite poetic. It's Wikipedia saying hello to the world. And so I want to talk a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey. How did I get here? Because I think for an audience like this, this is actually quite important. We have in the room many successful entrepreneurs, including those who are in the running for the prize. We also have some young people, some students, and maybe some people who are neither of those categories but have an idea they'd like to start something or they would like to be an entrepreneur. So because we're here, as a guest of the Ayn Rand Center of Israel, I started to think about what are the core values that I took from my studies of objectivism when I was young. And there are really these core values: reasons, purpose, self-esteem, and the virtues that correspond to them: rationality, productivity, and pride. But to really talk about that in the sense of entrepreneurship, one of the key things about reason, rationality is facts matter. And this is, I used to be a futures and options trader. That was another career that I had. And if you are a trader, facts matter every single day, because whatever you wish and hope might happen is not the same thing as what will happen. And in order to figure out what will happen, and this applies to all kinds of business, you can have a dream, but your dream better be tied to some facts of reality. Otherwise, it's never going to come true, and you're going to make errors because, and this involves judging people. Everything about this is like you have to be ruthlessly rational. You have to think a lot. Having a purpose, productivity, and particularly a long-term vision is really incredibly important. Certainly for Wikipedia, this idea, this vision that I mentioned at the beginning, a free encyclopedia for every single person on the planet, that got a lot of people excited and motivated. I think if I had said, why don't we write a biography of every US president, I think people would have said, oh yeah, okay, that sounds fine, but it's not that exciting. Whereas this is an exciting vision. It's sort of, particularly at the time when I started it, which is really, I got started at the height of the dot-com boom, and everybody was getting a little annoyed back then about too many pop-up ads and things like that. Little did they know how much they could have to be annoyed about in the future. But there was this idea of like, oh yeah, we've got this amazing tool now. Everyone on the planet can connect and share knowledge. I have an idea. Why don't we use it to connect and share knowledge? That might be a good use of the internet. And people agreed with me and liked that. And finally, self-esteem or pride, which is in some ways what Ayn Rand is most famous for, but also slightly most controversial for. But I think once you understand her idea in this field, in particular, she described it as moral ambitiousness, which means it isn't, as in the introduction, it isn't just how do I make the most money possible and be ruthless and trample poor people. No, it's about what can I do that's actually interesting and big and ethical and kind of value-driven. What do I want to do with my life? And then finally, you have to survive all the bumps along the way. I mean, I was looking at this statue here, and I've never quite looked like that. And so we have these symbols and these images, right, of perfection. And many of us have actually a fairly flawed idea about entrepreneurship. The case studies or the models that people have in mind would be, say, Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, someone who at a very early idea had a genius idea and goes from success to success and becomes one of the wealthiest people in the world. But the truth is that isn't what most entrepreneurship is like. Most entrepreneurship is really about surviving the bumps along the way and finding your way forward through that. So I'll just take you through a quick sort of potted history of my career. This is downtown Chicago. I used to work in Chicago. I was a futures and options trader, as I mentioned. And, I worked in the markets and was doing upstairs trading, arbitrage, very mathematical. I used to be quite smart. And And so basically, I was doing this, and then I had a brilliant business idea while I was working. So I saw that people were using very inefficient ways to get food at work. You would fax in your order. Probably the young people might need a picture to understand what a fax machine was in the olden days. You would call somebody, you send somebody to get the food, and I just thought, this is all, I was using the internet quite a lot. Let's put this all on the internet. Like, clearly in the future you're going to order food through the internet and it's going to be delivered, which of course today is quite commonplace. But the result of my brilliant business idea back then was failure. Jimmy Wales is good at it. In 1996, restaurant owners looked at me like I was from Mars. They had no idea. I mean, I literally went into someone, said, we should put your menu on the internet, and they're like, I don't really know what you're talking about. They had no idea. So then I started a lot of different projects. I'm going to carry you through a few of them. One of the things people don't know about me is I'm also a great genius at branding. So I started a search engine. It was called 3 Apes. Type your search and the apes will find it. I don't know why it didn't catch on, but I did have a brilliant business idea, which was to have pay-per-click advertising, but there would be 2 ways to pay. You could either just pay for the advertising, but we didn't really have any traffic yet, or you could send traffic to the search engine and earn credits and then therefore do this. And I thought this will be a way for viral growth. People can send traffic and they'll get credit in the advertising. It'll be great. What was the result? Failure. Jimmy Wales is good at it. Chinese spammers took over the site within 3 months. So I was getting a lot of traffic from China, and unfortunately two problems with that. One, I didn't speak a word of Chinese. If I were really after making money, I should have moved to China. I'd be Jack Ma now, but the other thing was they didn't really understand the offer. So then I got these very angry emails wanting to know when I was going to pay them, and I explained, no, you get credit for traffic, and anyway, it didn't work. So shut that down. Then I started Newpedia. So Newpedia was a similar vision to Wikipedia, a free encyclopedia for everybody, but it would be written by experts. I hired a PhD in philosophy to design it, and it was this same idea, freely licensed encyclopedia and all of this. What was the result? Failure. Jimmy Wales is good at it. I spent about $250,000 getting the first 12 articles published. So the problem with the system was it was a very top-down system. We talked a lot about how would you make an online encyclopedia with volunteers online, and we decided that it would be considered a joke unless it were even more academic than Britannica. And so we had a 7-stage review process to get anything published. You actually had to, it was the olden days, you had to fax in your CV to prove you were qualified to write. And we had actually a fair number of people. There were about 5,000 people signed up on the site. We had about 200 people active on the mailing list discussing how to create an encyclopedia. But the problem was it was very intimidating. You couldn't really get started. It was scary to people. I knew it wouldn't work when I decided, okay, I left the PhD program. I never finished my PhD in finance, but I'd done all but the dissertation. And I thought, oh, I'll write an article about Robert Merton. He had recently won the Nobel Prize in economics for his work on option pricing theory. I had a published paper on option pricing theory. I was like, I had worked through the math in all of his works, and I said, oh, I can write this. And I sat down to write, and I felt very, very intimidated because they were going to take my resulting biography of this famous economist and send it to the most prestigious finance professors they could find to give me critique and notes. And it was scary. It was like worse than being in graduate school, and I was doing it for free and not going to get a degree at the end. So this wasn't going to work. And I realized, oh, this isn't fun. And we have to make it somehow easier and more fun. So then I had a sort of at the moment of near failure, I had a really dumb idea, which would still free encyclopedia for everybody, but just open a website and let anybody edit it. We had no advertising, no sane business plan of any kind. And what was the result? Ooh, success. Even Jimmy can do it sometimes. So Wikipedia, of course, has been a massive success. It's the #5 website in the world, changing the face of knowledge forever. And it's an inspirational story. It takes me all around the world to meet people like you. And, it's been incredibly transformative in my life and in the lives of so many people. So after this, I am, by my nature, I think of myself fundamentally, and we'll get to why I think this is important in a minute. I think of myself as an entrepreneur first. And so I'm always looking for the new idea. I'm always looking like what's interesting to do, what can be fun to play with at this time. So the encyclopedia was the start. And if you think about an encyclopedia, you know, it's a set of books about this big, A through Z. But the library is much, much bigger. So I thought to myself, you know, this is working very well, but what could be beyond the encyclopedia? And so I thought, okay, how about a library? So the brilliant business idea here was build on the Wikipedia model, empower everyone to build the rest of the library, focus on making it easy to use. And unlike Wikipedia, which I decided should be in the nonprofit structure because the volunteers really wanted it, and for an encyclopedia, it's educational. It just felt like the right vibe to me, artistically, I would say. I think of Wikipedia as a temple for the mind and not a place you would go to, search for cheap Canon cameras or something like this, as which is more commercial. So I thought about topics that would have good ad revenue and get started, and what was the result? Oh, success. Even Jimmy can do it a second time. So fandom is what it's called now. It was called Wikia in the early days. Over 200 million monthly users, over $200 million in revenue, really big in entertainment and gaming, so it didn't actually turn out to be the rest of the library. We have a few more academic sort of things. There's a psychology wiki and a few things like that. But by and large, it's entertainment and gaming. So if you're into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, our wiki, you probably have ended up there. We've got 21,000 pages about everything Marvel related. One of my favorite TV shows, if you haven't seen this, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. This slide has been in here for a while. I didn't particularly choose this for an Israeli audience, but it's all about Jewish New York, really. It's really kind of a fun thing, and she's quite a funny character. Anyway, so every TV show you can think of, everything on Netflix, old video games, all of that, incredibly popular, but they're also community-driven websites. Everything on the sites are written by fans, community members, and all of that, and it's been incredibly successful. So what are some of the lessons that I've learned? And I think this is what is really important, and what I said I would come back to. So one of the phrases I wish I had invented is a very Silicon Valley phrase of fail faster. And this key here, don't tie your ego to a particular business. So for me, I think of myself first as an entrepreneur, and second as sort of founder of Wikipedia. That's actually a nice one to think, oh yes, I founded Wikipedia. That one's not too bad. I don't often think of myself as the founder of like 30 different very failed websites. Because the truth is real entrepreneurs fail and fail and fail. And I think what's really important is to enjoy yourself along the way, and in the end you will succeed. One of the things that sometimes, when I'm starting a new project, and I'm always somehow starting some kind of new project, I've had, this same kind of fear that you might have as a young entrepreneur of what if this fails, it's going to be embarrassing. I started a site a few years ago called Wiki Tribune, which hasn't completely failed. I'll tell you about that in a second. But I had this very painful experience when I basically hired a bunch of journalists. I was trying to solve the fake news problem. The first approach I took wasn't working, and so I had to lay off all the journalists, and then there was this big write-up in Wired magazine saying he was going to solve the problem of journalism and he failed. And I was like, oh God, this is terrible, it's awful. Of course, then I remembered I created Wikipedia, so it's not like people are going to think, oh, what a failure this guy is. But I do say to young people, one of the great advantages of being a young entrepreneur is if you start something and you fail, basically nobody really cares. Nobody's paying nearly as much attention as you think they are. Maybe your mom might care, something like that, but she'll love you anyway, almost certainly. Or if she didn't, she was never going to, so don't worry about it. And, well, it happens. And so, realistically, what I say to people, one of the most important things you can inculcate, one of the virtues that you can have, so to speak, is a high toleration for the possibility of failure. Because if you're innovating, if you're really pushing things forward, you're going to be in some small way or large way doing something that hasn't been done before and that you can't really be certain is going to work. And that's okay. Because if you don't try something that might fail, you're probably not trying something that's interesting enough to really transform your life or transform some aspect of the world. So that's my main message for young entrepreneurs. And I think now is a good time to move on to the very exciting bit of the awards ceremony. Thank you.